The crash of porcelain silenced the room. Wine splattered across the marble floor, pooling around Helena's knees as every pair of eyes turned toward her. Her trembling hands tried to gather the shards, but they cut her fingers, thin lines of red mixing with the crimson spill. The hum of the chandelier above flickered, the light trembling just like her. Then, from the end of the table, a man's shadow fell over her, tall, sharp, merciless. Ethan Sterling didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You've embarrassed my guests," he said, his tone cold enough to freeze the air. His tailored suit caught the light, a perfect contrast to Helena's stained uniform. He crossed his arms, studying her like an insect under glass. Around them, whispers began to spread, quiet, cruel, and electric. Helena's throat tightened. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident." Her voice broke on the word accident. The restaurant staff avoided her eyes, pretending to polish glasses or adjust silverware. But she could feel their pity, the kind that burned worse than anger. Ethan leaned closer, his cologne heavy with power and arrogance. "You're fired," he said simply. The words dropped like stones into silence. The world blurred as tears welled in her eyes. For a moment she thought she'd faint. Her breath came shallow and fast. Then she noticed something, a gleam of metal on his name tag. Sterling. That name hit her like a whisper from a dream. Sterling, the same name printed faintly on the back of her worn ID card. A strange chill crawled up her spine. She had never met another person with that surname. And yet, here it was, attached to the man who had just destroyed her dignity. She stood slowly, shards crunching beneath her shoes. Ethan turned away before she could speak, dismissing her with a flick of his hand. The guests returned to their conversations, pretending nothing had happened. But Helena felt the weight of every gaze following her as she left the room. It wasn't just humiliation. It was fate knocking on the door she didn't know existed. Before we go on, tell me in the comments, from where are you watching this story? I'd love to know where in the world you're joining Helena's journey from. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap. She stood beneath the glowing hotel sign, the city alive and indifferent. The name Sterling Hotel shimmered above her, mocking her with every letter. She whispered it under her breath, as if saying it might unlock a forgotten part of her soul. Something about that name belonged to her. She could feel it. Back in her small apartment, Helena sat on her narrow bed, replaying the humiliation again and again. The broken plates, his eyes, that name. She opened her worn purse, pulling out her ID, Helena Sterling. It had always felt like a strange coincidence, a relic of paperwork. But tonight, it didn't feel random anymore. It felt like destiny trying to be heard. Sleep refused to come. She rummaged through a box of old things her adoptive mother had left behind. Faded photographs, hospital papers, and a tiny bracelet with a name engraved. Baby Sterling. Her breath caught. The same name, the same blood. Tears blurred her vision as she realized this wasn't just a coincidence. The humiliation at the hotel wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a revelation 25 years in the making. The man who destroyed her career might be the same man who stole her life. Helena looked toward the city skyline through the cracked window and whispered, "I'll find out who you really are." The night swallowed her words. But destiny had already heard them. The night faded into a grey dawn that offered no comfort. Helena sat at her kitchen table, staring at the hospital bracelet resting in her palm. Baby Sterling. The letters seemed to breathe with every heartbeat. How could the man who humiliated her share her name? The thought pulsed in her mind like an unanswered call. She opened her laptop, the glow painting her face with cold light. Typing Ethan Sterling, she scrolled through pages of results, business awards, luxury properties, magazine covers. There he was, smiling beside politicians and actors. The caption read, "Ethan Sterling, CEO of the Sterling Group, heir to the Sterling fortune." Her hands shook. Heir. If he was the heir, then who was she? Her stomach twisted. She clicked on an old newspaper headline. Tragic car accident claims, Sterling couple, leaves infant missing. The article was dated 25 years ago. Her pulse quickened as she read. The child had never been found. A single photo accompanied the story. A baby wrapped in a white blanket, a tiny bracelet glinting in the sun. The same bracelet in her hand. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "That's me." The air felt suddenly thinner, like the world was tilting. Everything her adoptive mother had told her, the vague story about being left at a clinic, now seemed like a veil, hiding something much darker. She wasn't an orphan by chance. She had been erased. Determined, Helena dug deeper. She searched for adoption records, but her name led nowhere. Dead ends, missing files, a digital maze designed to hide a truth someone wanted forgotten. Her heart pounded as she realized how carefully this had all been buried. Someone powerful had made her disappear, and that someone now owned her family's empire. She leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. The room felt smaller, her breath louder. Why would he do it? She whispered to herself. Was it greed, jealousy, or something even colder, the belief that she didn't deserve to exist? Each possibility sliced through her chest like glass, and yet beneath the fear, a flame began to burn. The next morning, Helena took the subway to the records office, clutching a folder of old documents. The building smelled of dust and bureaucracy, the kind that forgets people on purpose. An elderly clerk looked up, curious, as she explained her request. "Sealed records, miss. Only a court order can open those," he murmured. But his eyes softened when he saw her trembling hands. He leaned closer, voice low. "Someone powerful wanted this file locked away. You didn't hear that from me." The weight of those words pressed against her ribs. Helena thanked him quietly, stepping out into the city's roar. The truth was out there, hidden behind walls of wealth and lies. And she had just found the first crack. As she walked home, her reflection in the shop windows looked unfamiliar, older, harder, alive. Every step echoed with a question that would not leave her. What did Ethan Sterling do to me? She didn't have the answer yet, but she had something far stronger: purpose. The waitress who once trembled was gone. That night, Helena sat by her window again, the city lights glimmering like distant stars. The bracelet lay beside her laptop, catching the glow. She traced the engraved letters with her fingertip, whispering her full name: Helena Sterling. The words felt both foreign and right. Somewhere, deep down, she knew the truth would no longer stay silent. The morning light crept across Helena's desk as she spread out every document she owned. Old letters, photos, her birth bracelet, fragments of a life she never understood. The edges of the papers fluttered under the ceiling fan like they were whispering secrets. Somewhere inside these pieces, she believed, was the key to who she really was. She just needed to listen closely enough to hear it. Her first stop was the local courthouse. The hallways smelled of paper, ink, and time. Behind a counter, a young clerk scanned her request for birth records and frowned. "This file is sealed under private order," he said, lowering his voice, "and it's connected to a powerful estate. I'm sorry, miss. There's nothing I can do." Helena's pulse quickened. That word again. Estate. She stepped outside, the courthouse doors closing behind her with a heavy echo. The city looked the same, yet it felt like she was walking inside a lie. Every car horn, every passing stranger seemed to mock her ignorance. She clutched the strap of her bag, whispering to herself, "I'll find it somewhere else. Someone must know." The wind carried her words into the crowd. At the public archives, she dug through dusty boxes until her fingers were grey with dust. Most files were ordinary, but one caught her eye. A ledger of hospital records from 25 years ago. Her name wasn't there. But another file was missing entirely, torn clean from the folder. Her stomach dropped. Someone had erased her from history on purpose. An older woman shelving books noticed her distress. "Looking for someone?" she asked kindly. Helena hesitated, then nodded. "My parents," she whispered. The woman smiled softly, but her eyes were knowing. "Some truths, dear, have been paid to stay buried." The words chilled her to the bone. Even strangers seemed to sense that her past wasn't just forgotten. It was stolen. She spent the afternoon visiting old clinics, searching for anyone who remembered the name Sterling. Most shrugged or shook their heads, but at the last one, a decaying building with faded paint, a nurse's face froze when she heard it. "Sterling," the woman repeated, voice trembling. "I remember a baby. There was confusion that night, and men in suits who came later." Her hands trembled as she spoke. Helena leaned in, heart pounding. "What men?" she asked. But the nurse's eyes darted toward the hallway cameras. "You should go," she whispered urgently. "You're not safe if you keep asking." The words struck her harder than any threat. Not safe. For the first time, Helena realized the truth she was chasing might also be chasing her back. Outside, rain began to fall, soaking through her jacket. The city blurred behind streaks of water as she ran toward the subway. Her mind was chaos. Faces, voices, that single word echoing Sterling. Every answer she found only opened new questions. But the fear that had once paralyzed her now fueled her steps. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was hunting. On the train, she stared at her reflection in the dark window. Her eyes looked different, sharper, alive. "Whoever you are," she murmured to the reflection of Ethan Sterling in her memory, "I'm coming for the truth." The train roared into the tunnel, swallowing the sound of her promise. Somewhere in the city above, destiny stirred. When Helena returned home that night, an envelope waited under her door. No address, no name. Inside was a single photograph, her as a baby in her mother's arms, and standing behind them, smiling faintly, was Ethan, a child himself. On the back, written in neat slanted handwriting, were 3 words: "He knows everything." Helena stared at the photograph under the dim glow of her bedside lamp. Her baby face smiled innocently, unaware of the storm waiting decades ahead. Ethan stood behind her in the picture, younger but unmistakable. The boy who grew into the man who destroyed her life. Her hands trembled as the realization sank in. This was no coincidence. This was a hidden truth carved into her bloodline. Sleep abandoned her again that night. She spent hours tracing the handwriting on the back of the photo. He knows everything. Who was he? And who sent this message? The handwriting was elegant, almost feminine, as if written by someone who cared. But about what? The truth or the danger? Her mind spiraled with possibilities until the sunrise painted her walls in gold and dread. The next day, Helena returned to the only person who might know something. Her adoptive mother's old lawyer, Mr. Cole. His office smelled of old books and secrets. The man looked startled to see her. "Helena, I thought you moved away," he said carefully. "There's something I need to know," she answered, placing the photograph on his desk. His eyes froze the instant he saw it. "Mr. Cole rubbed his temples, the weight of memory dragging his voice down. "Your parents, David and Margaret Sterling, died in a car accident. But not everything about that night was clear." He opened a dusty drawer and pulled out an old file, yellowed and trembling in his hands. "There were rumors," he continued quietly, "that someone tampered with the will right before their deaths." Helena's pulse roared in her ears. She leaned forward. "Who?" she demanded. The lawyer hesitated. Ethan was the eldest. He inherited everything, but there were inconsistencies, signatures that didn't match, documents that appeared after the funeral. His words fell like stones in water, spreading silent ripples through Helena's chest. "I wanted to investigate," he added, "but I was persuaded not to." Fear shadowed his eyes. "Persuaded?" Helena repeated. "By who?" Mr. Cole didn't answer. He simply nodded toward the window, where a sleek black car was parked across the street. The same car had been there every day, watching. The lawyer's voice dropped to a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here, Helena. If you value your life, stop looking." But stopping was no longer an option. The truth had already chosen her. She left the office with the file tucked under her coat. The city's sunlight felt colder than before. Every sound, footsteps, horns, distant laughter, now carried a warning. She knew she was being followed. The photo, the sealed files, the lies, all pointed in one direction. Ethan, her brother, her enemy, the man who had turned her birthright into his empire. Back in her apartment, Helena spread the documents across the floor. Among them was a faded piece of paper, a page from the original will. Her parents had divided their fortune equally, half for Ethan, half for Helena. The signature below had been scratched out violently, replaced by another in darker ink. She stared at the forgery until her eyes burned with tears. Her heart wavered between sorrow and rage. "You took everything," she whispered to the photo on the table, "even my name." The bracelet gleamed faintly beside it, catching the light like an echo of justice. She knew what had to come next: evidence, proof strong enough to tear down the empire built on lies, and for that she would need to go deeper than ever before. As the night settled, Helena sat by the window, the city lights flickering like fading stars. The black car was still there, motionless, watching. She felt its gaze like ice on her skin. "You can follow me," she whispered into the dark, "but you can't stop the truth." Somewhere in the silence, a door creaked. The past had just stepped closer. The Sterling Corporation towered above the city like a monument to greed. Its glass walls reflected the skyline, blindingly clean, too clean for the rot that lived inside. Helena stood across the street, hood up, heart pounding, clutching a stolen security badge Marcus had given her. The plan was reckless, but so was every moment of her life since she'd learned the truth. Tonight, she wasn't a waitress. She was a storm in disguise. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble and gold. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the floor as she walked past the night guard, nodding like she belonged there. Every light, every camera felt like an eye. The elevator doors closed with a hiss, sealing her inside a rising heartbeat of steel. Floor 32, archives and legal storage. That's where the ghosts of her family waited. The elevator dinged. She stepped into a corridor that smelled of dust and ink. Rows of metal cabinets stretched endlessly, each drawer labeled with names, dates, lives. Helena's hands trembled as she pulled open a drawer marked Sterling Estates, 2000-2001. Inside, thick folders lay stacked like coffins. Her breath caught when she saw her parents' names, David and Margaret Sterling. She opened one file. The first pages were normal, property deeds, legal letters. But then she saw it, a copy of the will, her father's signature scrawled unevenly. Underneath, a newer page. Same will, same layout, but with Ethan's signature stamped across the bottom. The ink was darker, fresher, forged. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This was it, proof of everything. Helena took out her phone, snapping photo after photo. The flash reflected against the metal cabinets like sparks in the dark. She was shaking, both from adrenaline and from the weight of justice in her hands. These papers were worth more than gold. They were truth, power, and revenge rolled into one. But truth, she was about to learn, always comes with a price. A sound cut through the silence, a door opening down the hall. She froze. Footsteps echoed slowly, methodically, like they already knew she was there. Helena turned off her phone's light, holding her breath. The air smelled faintly of coffee and cologne, not a guard, someone else. "Who's there?" a voice called out. Male, calm, too calm. Her heart pounded. She slipped between shelves, crouching low. The voice drew closer. "I know someone's here. Come out, and I'll pretend I didn't see you." But Helena stayed silent. The folder in her hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She could hear the man's shoes stop just beside her row. Silence stretched sharp as glass, then the beam of a flashlight. She ran. Papers flew from her bag as she sprinted toward the stairwell, every footstep exploding in her chest. "Stop!" the man shouted, his voice now cold and commanding. Helena didn't look back. She burst through the emergency door, alarms blaring. The stairwell spun around her as she descended, floor after floor, the sound of pursuit chasing her like thunder. By the time she reached the alley outside, her lungs burned. She stumbled into the rain, clutching the photos tight against her chest. Behind her, security lights flickered, cutting through the darkness like lightning. She looked up at the tower, Ethan's empire, glowing like a god above her. For the first time, she saw it not as something untouchable, but something doomed to fall. Helena slipped into the shadows, heart racing. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have taken those files." Her fingers went cold. She looked around, but the street was empty except for the hum of rain. The truth was no longer hidden, and neither was she. Somewhere, Ethan Sterling now knew her name. Again. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. Helena sat in a small cafe across from the Sterling Tower, her hair damp, her nerves frayed. On her phone screen glowed the headline of an investigative article, "The Hidden Crimes of the Ultra-Rich," by Sophia Reed. The journalist's piercing tone, her reputation for fearlessness. Helena felt a spark of hope. Maybe this woman could help her bring Ethan down. She found Sophia's office in a rundown building on the east side of the city. The walls were lined with photographs, newspaper clippings, and the faint smell of ink and coffee. Sophia herself looked up from behind her cluttered desk, mid-30s, sharp eyes, a presence that demanded honesty. "You said your story involves the Sterlings?" she asked, suspicion already curling in her voice. Helena nodded, placing the stolen documents on the desk like fragile glass. "These are copies of my parents' will. They were forged. Ethan Sterling. He took everything." Sophia raised an eyebrow, flipping through the papers with the ease of someone used to smelling lies. "If these are real, they could destroy one of the most powerful families in the country," she said. "But you're risking your life bringing them here." "I already have," Helena replied quietly. "They know I have the files." Sophia's expression softened for the first time. "Then you'll need protection, and proof that can't vanish." She opened a drawer and pulled out a small recorder. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." The click of the recorder echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. Helena spoke for nearly an hour about the humiliation, the bracelet, the sealed records, the photograph. Her voice trembled, but every word sharpened her resolve. When she finished, Sophia leaned back in silence, staring at the ceiling as if piecing together a puzzle too large for one person. Finally, she said, "If this story's true, Ethan Sterling is finished." For the first time, Helena smiled faintly. "So, you'll help me?" Sophia met her eyes. "If we do this, there's no turning back. Once the truth comes out, He'll try to bury both of us. Helena nodded. Then we'll make sure he can't. And their alliance was forged in fear and in the faint glimmer of justice. Over the next few days, they met in secret, collecting evidence. Sophia traced bank transfers, property records, and old press statements. Every thread led back to Ethan. Every answer brought new danger. One night, as Helena left Sophia's office, she noticed the same black car parked nearby. Its engine idled softly, headlights off, watching, always watching. The following morning, Sophia called her in panic. "Don't come to the office," she whispered. "They were here, men in suits looking for you. They took my hard drive." Helena's chest tightened. "Are you safe?" "For now," Sophia replied, her voice trembling. "But they know you're not just a name anymore." The line went dead. Silence filled the space where hope had been. Helena packed a small bag, adrenaline taking over. She couldn't go home. Not now. The streets blurred as she moved through the city, blending into the crowd. For every corner she turned, she imagined Ethan's eyes behind tinted glass. Her name, once lost, was now a target. The truth had begun to scream, and the world was starting to listen. That night, she hid in a cheap motel by the freeway. Neon lights flickered through the blinds, painting her face in blue and red. On the nightstand lay Sophia's business card, damp from the rain. Helena whispered into the dark, "You believed me when no one else did." Outside, thunder rolled like a warning. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The motel room smelled of dust and old rain. The wallpaper peeled in corners, and the hum of traffic outside never stopped. Helena sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her phone lay silent, no calls from Sophia, no messages, no hope. For the first time, she wondered if she'd made a mistake challenging a man like Ethan Sterling. On the flickering TV screen, Ethan's face appeared, smiling, polished, perfect. He stood at a charity gala, shaking hands with politicians, the headline reading, "A Heart for Humanity." Helena's stomach turned. The same man who had stolen her life was now being celebrated for saving others. The world loved his mask. They couldn't see the monster behind it. She threw the remote across the room, the batteries scattering on the floor. "Liar," she whispered. The anger burned through her chest, but beneath it was something heavier. Grief. He hadn't just stolen her inheritance. He'd stolen her identity, her peace, her past. Now, even her safety was gone. She had nothing left except the truth and the will to make it matter. Rain began to fall outside again, soft at first, then furious. She pressed her forehead against the cold window pane, watching the streaks of water race each other down the glass. "What would they think of me now?" she whispered. Her parents, the people she barely remembered. Somewhere deep inside, she hoped they were proud. Somewhere she hoped they saw her still fighting. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Instead, she opened her bag and took out the documents again. The proof, the lies, the signatures that killed everything good. "You can't hide forever," she said aloud, as if Ethan could hear her through the storm. Her reflection in the window looked back, tired, pale, but alive. "You took everything," she said, "but you didn't take me." A knock startled her, 3 slow raps on the door. Helena froze, heart pounding. She turned off the TV and held her breath. Another knock, louder this time. "Helena!" a voice whispered. She hesitated, then opened the door just an inch, but no one was there, only an envelope, wet from the rain. Inside, a single note. They found Sophia. Her blood went cold. She sank onto the bed, clutching the paper. Images of Sophia flashed through her mind, her determined eyes, her promise to help. Guilt clawed at Helena's chest. "This is my fault," she whispered. If Sophia was gone, if she'd been hurt, it was because Helena couldn't stop digging. For the first time, she felt the weight of what she'd started, a war she couldn't control. Hours passed, The rain stopped. Silence took over, heavy and suffocating. Helena lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. She thought about giving up, just disappearing again, letting Ethan have his empire built on lies. But then she remembered the bracelet, her mother's hands, the life that was stolen before it began. Her tears dried. The fear turned into fuel. She rose before dawn, stuffing the documents back into her bag. "No more running," she whispered. The motel mirror caught her reflection as she pulled on her coat. The same woman, but with a different fire in her eyes. The world had already taken everything she loved. Now she would take back what was hers. Not as a victim, as a storm. Outside, the sunrise painted the city in blood-orange light. The streets glistened, the air fresh after the rain. Helena walked toward the horizon with steady steps. Every heartbeat echoed with one name: Ethan. He had buried her once. He would not do it again. The morning air was crisp as Helena walked aimlessly through the city, the world waking up around her. She hadn't slept, but exhaustion had turned into clarity. Every sound, the hum of traffic, the chatter of strangers, felt distant, unreal. She needed direction, but more than that, she needed a reason to keep believing she could win. And then fate intervened. A hand touched her shoulder. "Helena!" She turned sharply, ready to run, until she saw him, a man in his early 40s, kind eyes framed by the wrinkles of worry. "My name's Marcus," he said quietly. "I used to work for your father." The words froze her where she stood. Her father. Had been years since anyone had said that name with meaning. "How do you know me?" she whispered. Marcus led her to a small diner tucked between office buildings. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and nostalgia. They sat in a corner booth, and he slid a faded photograph across the table, her parents standing beside a younger version of himself. "Your father trusted me," Marcus said. "After the accident, Ethan took control. He forced everyone loyal to your parents to disappear." Helena's heart raced as she studied the photo. "You knew what he did," she said, voice trembling. Marcus nodded. "I tried to expose him once, but he had power, money, connections. People who crossed him lost everything, or worse." He paused, lowering his voice. "But when I saw your name appear on old employment records, I knew you were alive. I've been watching, waiting for you to resurface." For the first time in weeks, Helena felt seen, not as a target or a secret, but as a person. "Why help me now?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "Because your father believed in doing what's right, no matter the cost, and because I'm tired of living in fear." He slid a small USB drive across the table. Inside are files Ethan buried years ago, evidence, bank transfers, forged contracts, all of it. Her breath caught as she held the drive. It was lighter than she expected, almost too light for the power it contained. "This could destroy him," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "Not destroy, expose. Don't become like him, Helena. Don't chase revenge, chase truth." His words sank deep, steadying her like an anchor in a storm. For the first time, she felt a fragile kind of hope. They spent hours poring over the files. Helena's hands trembled as she read line after line of corruption. Every number, every signature was a wound that had never healed. But now, she wasn't alone. Marcus guided her through the maze, patient and methodical. "We'll need a public stage," he said finally, "somewhere he can't hide behind his money or his name." Helena looked up, determination sharpening her features. "The company's anniversary gala," she said. "It's next month. He'll be there, surrounded by cameras and the people he's fooled." Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen in days. "Then that's where it ends." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, as if the city itself agreed. When they left the diner, dusk had fallen, painting the streets in amber light. Marcus walked a few steps ahead, scanning the crowd like a man who'd been hunted before. "Be careful," he warned. "If Ethan finds out you're alive, he'll come for you." Helena slipped the USB drive into her pocket, her jaw set. "Let him try," she said softly. "I've already survived his worst." As they parted ways, Marcus turned back once. "Your father would be proud of you," he said. The words caught her off guard, hitting deeper than she expected. She watched him disappear into the crowd, then looked up at the skyline, at the towering Sterling Tower glowing like a crown of lies. "Soon," she whispered, "you'll see who really deserves that name." Days turned into a rhythm of secrecy and purpose. Helena and Marcus met in hidden cafes and empty parking lots, piecing together Ethan's empire of lies. Every discovery brought both power and danger. The more she learned, the clearer it became. Ethan hadn't just stolen her inheritance, he'd stolen her story. And now she was ready to take it back. Marcus trained her in how to move through the world, like someone born to power. "Confidence," he said, straightening her shoulders. "People see what you show them. Walk like the room belongs to you." It felt strange at first, pretending to be someone else, until Helena realized she wasn't pretending. This was who she'd always been before the lies erased her name. She studied old footage of her parents, their elegance, their quiet strength, her mother's laughter, her father's posture during interviews, the way they carried dignity like a second skin. They didn't need to prove their worth, she whispered one night, watching a grainy video. They just lived it. For the first time, Helena stopped seeing herself as the waitress Ethan humiliated and started seeing the heiress she was meant to be. Marcus brought her to a tailor on the edge of downtown. The shop smelled of fabric and fresh thread. The seamstress, an old friend of Marcus, measured Helena in silence, her hands soft and steady. When she returned with a black silk dress, the mirror reflected someone unrecognizable, powerful, poised, dangerous. Helena smiled faintly. Now I looked like someone he'd regret underestimating. Still, the fear lingered. Late at night, Helena would wake with her heart racing, convinced someone was outside her door. Once, she caught a shadow moving near the window, a reminder that Ethan's reach was everywhere. Marcus insisted she carry a small voice recorder and always stay alert. "Truth is our weapon," he said, "but even truth needs protection." They rehearsed her plan for the gala, where she'd stand, when she'd speak, how she'd release the evidence. Helena memorized every step until it felt like choreography. "Once it starts," Marcus warned, "there's no going back." She nodded, eyes steady. "I don't want to go back." The waitress who once cleaned floors was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to reclaim her destiny. The weeks leading up to the gala were a blur of tension. Helena watched Ethan on television, smiling as if he owned the world. "Enjoy it," she muttered to the screen. "Your empire's living on borrowed time." Sometimes she imagined their confrontation, his shock, his rage, his disbelief when he realized the ghost he buried had come back to haunt him. That image kept her alive. On the eve of the gala, Marcus handed her a small silver locket. Inside was a photograph of her parents and baby Helena. "Your mother wore this the night she died," he said softly. Helena traced the picture with her thumb, feeling the warmth of something sacred. "This isn't about revenge anymore," she said. "It's about giving them peace." Marcus nodded. "Then make sure the world hears their story." That night, Helena stood by her window overlooking the city. The wind carried the hum of distant traffic and the faint echo of thunder. She could see the Sterling Tower glowing in the distance, golden and hollow. Tomorrow she would walk into that light, not as a servant, but as its rightful heir. She whispered to her reflection, "He took everything from me. Now I'll take back the truth." When dawn broke, the city felt electric. Helena slipped into the black dress, pinned the locket to her chest, and met Marcus outside. Neither spoke during the drive to the gala. Words felt too small for what was coming. As the Sterling Tower came into view, Helena took a deep breath. "Let's end this," she said. The car rolled forward into the storm she had created, and the truth waited on the other side. The Sterling Tower glittered like a crown of glass and deception. Limos lined the street, spilling out politicians, investors, and socialites dressed in diamonds. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted Ethan's name, their lenses worshipping him as if he were untouchable. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with music and the sweet scent of champagne. Every light sparkled, every smile hid a sin. Helena stepped out of Marcus's car, her black silk dress catching the reflection of 1,000 bulbs. Conversations paused as heads turned. The same waitstaff, once worked beside, now looked at her in disbelief. She walked through the golden doors as if she'd been born to them. Confidence draped her shoulders like armor. The locket over her heart burned like fire. Ethan stood near the stage, surrounded by applause. His smile was effortless, his suit immaculate, but when his eyes found Helena across the room, the world seemed to slow. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered. Then fear. He blinked, convinced his mind was playing tricks. The ghost he buried was walking through his empire, alive and radiant. Helena didn't flinch. She crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps, the crowd parting instinctively. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," she said softly when she reached him. The name tasted like irony on her tongue. Ethan forced a smile, his voice tightening. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," she replied. "But you will." Their eyes locked, and for the first time he didn't feel in control. Marcus watched from the edge of the room, signaling with a subtle nod. The journalists were already filming. The gala's stage lights bathed the room in gold, turning every secret into theater. Helena raised her champagne glass, her voice calm but commanding. "A toast," she said, "to truth, the only thing money can't buy." The crowd laughed politely, unaware of the storm forming in their midst. As the evening unfolded, Ethan tried to compose himself. He whispered to his assistant, ordering a background check on the mysterious woman, but Helena was steps ahead. Every introduction she made, every hand she shook, was part of a silent trap. "Sterling," guests whispered. "Is she family?" The rumor spread like wildfire, setting the stage for exposure. Midway through the night, Helena slipped to the side of the stage. Her heart pounded as she checked her phone. The files were ready to broadcast. Marcus gave her one last look, pride and fear mingling in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he mouthed. She nodded once. "This is for them." Then she stepped toward the microphone as the music faded and silence took the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath, "tonight we celebrate success. But success built on lies is nothing but a cage of gold." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ethan's face tightened, Helena's words sharpened with every breath. "My name," she said, pausing, "is Helena Sterling, daughter of David and Margaret Sterling, the true heirs of this empire." Gasps filled the room like thunder. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing Ethan's stunned expression. He tried to interrupt, but Helena raised her hand, her locket glinting under the lights. "My parents' will was forged. Their deaths were covered up, and the man who built this fortune stands on stolen ground." The truth spilled into every ear, every lens, unstoppable now. Ethan lunged forward, his mask finally cracking. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shouted. But Marcus stepped onto the stage, holding a printed document high, the original will. "The proof says otherwise," he declared. The crowd erupted, flashes blinding, questions flying. Helena turned to face Ethan one last time. "You wanted the world to see you as a hero," she said. "Now they will see you for what you really are." Chaos swallowed the ballroom. Reporters surged forward, microphones flashing like lightning. "Is this true, Mr. Sterling? Were the documents forged?" Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came. His perfect world was cracking under the weight of Helena's words. The crowd that once adored him now smelled blood. Cameras fed live to every major network. There was no escape. Helena stood at the center, calm amid the storm. She lifted a tablet and tapped the screen. The stolen files projected onto the ballroom's massive LED display. Scanned wills, forged signatures, secret bank accounts. Each line glowed like fire against the darkness of the truth. Gasps turned into shouts, and then into a silence sharper than any blade. Ethan's empire was unraveling in real time. Ethan's assistant tried to cut the feed, but Marcus had already secured it remotely. The video replayed clips of news anchors, charity events, and falsified contracts, all leading back to Ethan. His name appeared again and again beside words like fraud, embezzlement, deception. The guests began to step away from him, their loyalty evaporating under the glare of exposure. The king was standing naked before his court. "You think you can destroy me with lies?" Ethan shouted, his voice trembling. This is slander." Helena didn't flinch. "Then prove it," she said simply, her voice amplified through the speakers. "Show them the real will, the real truth." Her calmness was more dangerous than rage. Every word she spoke tightened the noose around his carefully built illusion. Marcus handed a folder to a journalist in the front row. "These are court-sealed documents, DNA tests confirming Helena Sterling's identity as the legitimate heir." The journalist's jaw dropped. "Is this verified?" "By 3 independent labs," Marcus replied. Cameras zoomed in on the evidence. Ethan's face drained of color. His carefully guarded secrets were now public property. Someone in the crowd shouted, "You stole from your own family!" Another voice followed, angrier. "How could you do this?" Ethan stumbled back, the world spinning. For a moment, Helena almost pitied him. Almost. She remembered the night on the hotel floor, the humiliation, the years of silence. Her pity died quickly. Justice was not cruelty, it was balance restored. Security guards approached, unsure whether to protect Ethan or remove him. The reporters closed in. Ethan raised his hands, shouting, "This woman is delusional." But before he could continue, Marcus played one last audio file, a recording of Ethan's voice from years ago. "Seal the child's record. She can't ever come back." The words echoed across the room like thunder. The crowd gasped again, this time in horror. Helena stood motionless, tears glistening but unfallen. "You erased me," she said softly. "But I remember now." Her voice broke through the chaos like a blade of light. Ethan's rage collapsed into despair. He looked smaller, suddenly weaker, a man who had built his life on ashes. "Helena," he whispered, but the word carried no power anymore. Police officers entered the ballroom, moving toward him. Ethan tried to push past them, shouting incoherently. But the crowd backed away, capturing every second on their phones. Helena turned away before they took him. She didn't need to see him fall. The sound of the handcuffs clicking was enough. That metallic snap was the end of a dynasty and the beginning of her freedom. As the officers led Ethan through the flashes of cameras, Helena stood beneath the chandelier, the same kind of light that once watched her humiliation. Now, it crowned her victory. The guests whispered her name, not in pity but in awe. For the first time in 25 years, Helena Sterling existed again, not as a shadow, but as truth itself. Morning broke with headlines that burned across every screen. Ethan Sterling exposed, corporate fraud and forgery revealed. News vans swarmed the Sterling Tower, reporters camped on the marble steps where once Ethan had stood untouchable. Now the empire trembled under the weight of truth. The board demanded his resignation before noon. The world had turned its back on him overnight. Helena watched it all from a hotel room across the city. Her reflection in the window merged with the chaos of flashing lights below. She should have felt victorious, but her heart was heavy. "He's paying for what he did," Marcus said gently. "You did what was right." Helena nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the skyline. "Then why does it still hurt?" she whispered. In Ethan's office, security cameras captured his downfall. He sat behind his mahogany desk, the same place where he had signed away her life. Reporters outside chanted his name like a verdict. His hands trembled as he poured a drink, whiskey spilling over the glass. The bottle shattered against the floor, his reflection fractured in the shards, the face of a man who had lost everything. When the board entered, they didn't speak. They placed documents before him, termination letters, transfer orders, legal notices. "Effective immediately," one of them said coldly. Ethan laughed, bitter and broken. "You think you can erase me?" But the silence that followed was louder than any answer. He had become what he feared most, irrelevant. Across town, Helena scrolled through her phone. The internet was flooded with her story. The forgotten heiress returns. People called her brave, a symbol of truth, yet the comments praising her victory felt hollow. She wasn't a hero. She was a survivor of someone else's sins. "Justice doesn't always feel like peace," she murmured, setting the phone aside. "Sometimes it just feels empty." Marcus brought her tea, his face lined with quiet concern. "You gave them the truth," he said. "Now give yourself rest." But Helena couldn't. She closed her eyes and saw Ethan's expression as they led him away. Not angry, but broken. That look haunted her. "He was my brother," she said softly. "Once." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "And you were his conscience. He just forgot to listen." Meanwhile, Ethan wandered through the halls of his empire one last time. The portraits of his parents watched silently as he passed. Their painted smiles seemed to judge him, to mourn him. He paused before one, his mother's face, warm and kind. "You gave her everything," he muttered, voice cracking, "and I destroyed it." His knees weakened as reality sank in. The Titan had fallen, and there was no one left to catch him. By evening, the news had shifted again, from his crimes to his capture. Images of police cars outside the Sterling estate filled the screens. Ethan was escorted out in handcuffs, his once perfect suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The same cameras that once adored him now devoured him. The flash of bulbs reflected off his tears. Pride had turned to ruin under the glare of truth. Helena turned off the television. Silence filled the room, deep and fragile. She looked at Marcus, who said nothing, only nodded in understanding. For the first time, Helena allowed herself to cry, not for what she lost, but for what could never be restored. Justice had come, but family was gone. The truth had set her free, but it had also left her alone. That night, she stood on the balcony, the wind cold against her face. Below, the city moved on, unaware that two lives had been rebuilt and broken in the same storm. Helena closed her eyes and whispered, "Let it end." And somewhere across the city, in a cold prison cell, Ethan stared at the same moon, whispering the same words. Two Sterlings, bound by blood, divided by truth. Winter settled over the city like a shroud. Outside the courthouse, snow softly onto the crowd of reporters and onlookers gathered behind barricades. Cameras pointed toward the grand steps where Ethan Sterling would face judgment. Inside, the air was heavy with whispers and anticipation. Justice, long delayed, was about to speak. Helena walked through the courthouse doors, flanked by Marcus and her attorney. Every flash of a camera felt like lightning against her skin. She kept her chin high, though her heart trembled beneath her coat. The walls smelled of paper, old wood, and fear, the same fear that once silenced her. But today she wasn't afraid. Today she was ready to be heard. Ethan entered moments later, escorted by officers. Gone was the polished tycoon. In his place stood a man hollowed by regret and ruin. His wrists were bound, his eyes bloodshot. For a fleeting moment their gazes met. No words passed between them, only a shared recognition that their fates were forever entwined. Once siblings. Now adversaries in truth's final act. The trial began with the reading of charges: fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. Ethan sat motionless as the words piled up like stones. The prosecution spoke first, presenting forged contracts, falsified wills, and bank transfers to offshore accounts. Each exhibit was another nail in the coffin of his empire. The courtroom murmured, the sound of disbelief turning into condemnation. When it was Helena's turn to testify, the air shifted. She rose slowly, every step echoing through the chamber. Her voice was calm, but edged with emotion. She recounted the humiliation in the hotel, the discovery of the bracelet, the stolen files, the years of silence. "He didn't just take money," she said. "He took my name, my life, my family's memory." Her voice cracked, but she did not cry. Ethan's lawyer tried to twist her words, suggesting greed, vengeance, manipulation. Helena met his gaze with quiet strength. "If truth is vengeance," she replied, "then maybe the world needs more of it." The gallery erupted in whispers. Even the judge paused, studying her. For the first time in the trial, Ethan looked away, his mask of defiance slipping. When Ethan took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. His voice was hoarse, trembling between pride and guilt. "I did what I had to do," he said. "Our parents were gone. I kept the company alive." Helena's attorney pressed, "By erasing your sister?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "She was a baby. I thought I could protect her, or maybe I just couldn't stand to share." The truth spilled out, bitter and raw. Helena felt something inside her break. For years she had imagined this moment, imagined hating him completely. But as she looked at the man before her, stripped of power and arrogance, she saw not a monster, but a broken boy who made monstrous choices. Forgiveness hovered like a ghost, not ready, but waiting. The judge's verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Ethan bowed his head. Helena closed her eyes as the sentence echoed through the hall. 20 years in federal prison. Justice had spoken, yet it didn't sound like victory. It sounded like an ending written in sorrow and relief. As the bailiffs led Ethan away, he turned one last time. "Helena," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." She didn't answer, but the tear that slipped down her cheek said everything words couldn't. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the city in quiet absolution. The trial was over, but healing had only begun. Weeks after the verdict, the Sterling estate stood silent for the first time in decades. The iron gates creaked open as Helena stepped through, her footsteps echoing on the stone path her parents once walked. Winter sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the mansion in shades of gold and grey. Everything smelled of dust, memory, and rebirth. The empire had fallen, but she had survived. Inside, the air was still and heavy with the ghosts of old wealth. Chandeliers hung dim with neglect, portraits veiled in cobwebs. Helena ran her fingers along the grand piano, a faint melody lingering in her memory. She remembered flashes, her mother's laughter, her father's hands guiding hers over the keys. "I'm home," she whispered softly, though the word felt fragile on her tongue. Marcus followed quietly, holding a box of documents. "It's all yours now," he said. "The company, the house, the name." Helena nodded, setting the box on a marble table. "No," she corrected gently. "It's theirs. I'm just giving it back its soul." She walked through the halls, touching each surface like reconnecting with ghosts. The silence felt sacred, like forgiveness taking shape. In her father's old office, sunlight illuminated the desk where Ethan once ruled. Helena opened a drawer and found a photograph of the family before the tragedy. Her parents smiling, Ethan as a boy with his arm around baby Helena. Time had frozen that love before it rotted into greed. She traced the image with trembling fingers. "What went wrong?" she whispered. But no one answered. Instead of restoring luxury, Helena began rebuilding purpose. She reopened the Sterling Foundation, redirecting its fortune to hospitals, schools, and orphanages. "If we give them chances," she told Marcus, "maybe no one else will have to grow up lost like I did." Newspapers called her the Phoenix Heiress. For once, she didn't mind the title. Rising from ashes wasn't vanity, it was survival. Days turned into weeks. Workers restored the house, wiping away years of decay. Helena often walked the gardens alone, feeling her parents' presence in the rustle of leaves. Sometimes she would stop by the fountain, where her reflection shimmered beside theirs in memory. "You tell me I've done enough," she whispered to the wind. "But there's still more to fix." One morning she found a letter delivered from the prison. The handwriting was unmistakable, Ethan's. Her hands shook as she opened it. "I watched your speech on TV. You've done what I couldn't. You made our name mean something again. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope you find peace, even if I never do." The words blurred behind her tears. She folded the letter gently, tucking it into her locket. That night, Helena sat by the fireplace, the flames dancing in quiet rhythm. Marcus joined her, setting down 2 cups of tea. "He wrote to you," he said softly. She nodded. "He's changing," Marcus offered. Helena smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just remembering who we used to be." The firelight reflected in her eyes, warm and weary. "Either way, it's time to let go." In the morning, she walked through the grand foyer one last time before the renovation began. The walls no longer felt heavy. They felt alive. She stopped by her mother's portrait and whispered, "It's over, Mama. We're whole again." The sun broke through the windows, scattering light across the floor like blessings. For the first time, Helena felt at peace. As she stepped outside, the gates closed behind her with a soft clang. The city stretched ahead, vast, bright, and waiting. Helena turned her face to the sky, breathing deeply. She had entered the story as a waitress and emerged as an heir, not of wealth, but of courage. The past no longer defined her. The future, at last, was hers to write. Spring returned to the city like a promise fulfilled. The air smelled of renewal, and sunlight spilled gently over the Sterling Foundation's new building. Inside, cameras flashed as Helena stood before a crowd of journalists, donors, and children from the scholarships she had created. The walls were filled with portraits, not of wealth, but of hope. This was the empire reborn through kindness. "Money doesn't heal," Helena said softly into the microphone. "But compassion does. For years, the Sterling name was built on lies. Today, we rebuild it on truth, and on the belief that no one is beyond redemption." Her voice carried a calm strength that silenced the room. Every face reflected awe, gratitude, and the quiet recognition of something greater than triumph: grace. Marcus stood nearby, pride shining in his eyes. He had witnessed every fall, every rise, every scar turned into a scarlet thread of meaning. "They'll remember you for this," he murmured after her speech. Helena smiled faintly. "I don't want them to remember me," she said. "I want them to remember what truth can do." And for the first time, she believed it. That afternoon, Helena visited the prison. The guard recognized her instantly, the heiress who'd unmade an empire. The metal doors clanged open, echoing through the corridor. She carried no anger, only a quiet resolve. In the visiting room, Ethan waited, thinner, older, his arrogance long gone. When he saw her, he looked down, ashamed. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied, sitting across from him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't hostile, it was human. Finally, Ethan looked up. "I ruined everything," he said, voice breaking. "I don't expect forgiveness." Helena studied him, not the monster from her nightmares, but the broken brother from an old photograph. "You don't need to expect it," she said gently. "You just need to accept it." He blinked, disbelief softening into tears. "Why?" he asked. "After everything?" Helena's answer was simple. "Because holding on to hate keeps you trapped in the same prison," she said. "I've lived there long enough." Ethan pressed a shaking hand against the glass between them, and for the first time in 25 years, Helena didn't pull away. Their reflections touched, divided by glass, united by blood. When she left the prison, the sun was setting behind the grey walls, painting them gold. She paused outside, letting the light wash over her. It didn't erase the past. It illuminated it, turning every scar into proof of survival. She whispered a quiet goodbye, not just to Ethan, but to the girl who once believed she was powerless. That version of her had served its purpose. She had found her strength. Months later, the Sterling Foundation became a beacon of change. New schools, shelters, and art programs carried her parents' names. The world spoke of Helena Sterling as a symbol of justice, but she never let it reach her heart. "Legacies aren't about names," she told Marcus during a rooftop gala. "They're about what we leave burning in others." He smiled. "Then yours will never die." On quiet evenings, Helena returned to the mansion garden, where roses bloomed. Beneath her mother's old fountain, she often sat there alone, reading letters from students her foundation had helped. Laughter from nearby children floated through the air. Peace, at last, had found her, not in revenge, but in purpose. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind, carrying whispers of the past and blessings of tomorrow. Under the fading light, she stood and looked toward the horizon. The sky blazed in colors of forgiveness, gold, rose, and deep violet. "We're free now," she said softly, her voice carried away by the breeze. Somewhere she hoped Ethan heard it too. And as the stars began to rise, Helena Sterling smiled, not as the heiress who lost everything, but as the woman who finally became everything she was meant to be. Final reflection plus CTA. Sometimes life doesn't take from us to punish, it takes to prepare. Helena lost everything, her home, her name, her past, and yet what she gained was far greater than any fortune. She found the courage to face truth, the strength to forgive, and the grace to start again. Her story isn't about revenge. It's about redemption, about the power that comes when we choose light over bitterness. Maybe you've been where Helena once stood, underestimated, forgotten, or broken by someone who was supposed to love you. Maybe you've had to rebuild from ashes too. If so, her story is yours, because every wound that didn't destroy you became proof that you were meant to rise. And sometimes forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom wearing a quiet smile. Before we end tonight's story, tell me in the comments, from where in the world are you watching this story? I'd love to know where Helena's journey reached you, and if this story touched your heart. If it made you believe again in justice, in hope, or in starting over, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might just change the way you see your own life. Because sometimes one story can heal more than 1,000 apologies, and this was Helena Sterling's story.